Good afternoon. Ukraine is on the line. My name is Enrique. We are UATV English and we do what we do best, debunk Russian propaganda by means of Ukrainian truth through all our global site. Please join us and help Ukraine by watching this very episode. Trust me, commenting and subscribing means a lot to us. Welcome to the News Pulse. See in the episode, unknown drones hit Russia multiple times. Another topic, horrible ballistic and drone attack on Kiev tonight. And a third, but last and not least, to Merz or not to Merz. Germany has a new Chancellor in an edgy win that almost ended up in political catastrophe, but it didn't. Early this morning, dozens of Ukrainian UAVs attacked targets on Russian soil. Several military and industrial sites were successfully targeted in the drone strike, according to Andriy Kovalenko, head of Ukraine's Center for Countering Disinformation. In Saransk, that is Mordovia in Russia, two industrial facilities were struck, the optical fiber systems. This is the plant and the Saransk cable machine construction plant, both of which produce optical fiber used in Russian drones. This was the second attack on the optical fiber systems plants, the only facility in Russia that manufactures optical fiber. In Tula Oblast, also in Russia, the Rostec enterprise was targeted successfully, specifically the state scientific and production enterprise Splav, Alloy in English, which produces multiple launch rocket systems such as Grad and Uragan Spyach and Tornado, as well as munitions for the TOS-1A, Sontsepyok. Also, in the Moscow region, the military airfield Kubinka was hit successfully, where MiG-29 and Su-27 fighter jets are located. Another strike targeted the Shaikovka Air Base in Kaluga, home to Tu-22M3 bombers and storage facilities for missiles, including Kh-22. NASA Satellites Resource Management System detects fires at both air bases. Russian media reports that these airfields host aircraft and personnel scheduled to take part in the May 9th Victory Parade. Awkward, comrades. Due to these drone attacks, temporary flight restrictions were imposed at airports in Moscow, Kaluga, Kazan, Nizhny Novgorod, Yaroslavl, Tambov and Sochi. In total, 447 Shahed drones and missiles were launched across Russian land overnight, according to Russian media. Well, I wonder, those Iranian Shahed drones, right? So I have an idea how to cut off some costs. Maybe we can seal a deal with Iran for these Shaheds to be delivered on DDU terms, meaning delivered to doors. So Ukraine just buys these Shahed drones from Iran in Iran, and then Iran then launches it over at Russian targets. We just tag the location, just optimizing logistics here. A new Ukrainian strike drone, the FP1, capable of hitting targets up to 1,600 kilometers deep behind enemy lines, was officially presented on May 6, 2025 in Kiev. According to Militani, Ukrainian armed forces began using the FP1 as early as 2024. It has already been used to destroy military targets near Russian borders successfully. The drone can carry a payload up to 120 kgs. The heavier the warhead, of course, the shorter the flight range. Deputy Minister of Strategic Industries Anna Gvozdyar comments on the scale and international interest in the new Ukrainian-made drone.
This drone is already being produced in large numbers, and there's significant interest from our partners. It was developed in Ukraine and quickly scaled up. This is one more innovation we're proud to share with our allies. Anna Gvozdyar, Deputy Minister for Strategic Industries of Ukraine, in a press statement.
And NATO member countries watch closely what's going on here in Ukraine and already invest millions of euro in production of, that's right, Ukrainian long-range weapons, long-term investments. For example, Lithuania announced 10 million euro of investments to produce Ukrainian drones that strike deep. Also, Sweden and Denmark invest into Ukrainian armament too, simply because it is much cheaper and faster to build weapons for Ukraine in Ukraine, rather than contracting European or American producers and wait literally for decades before orders are delivered. Ukrainian MPs often take part in discussions in and between EU and PARSE. Maria Mazentseva has commented on the matter for you.
We can talk about different countries, but for example, Lithuania has already allocated 10 million euros to produce long-range Ukrainian weapons. Yes, it is twice cheaper. The second area is Sweden. Sweden is a new member of the NATO security alliance. The expansion took place thanks to Russia's aggression against us, no matter how strange that sounds. Sweden will now invest state funds in long-range drones. We understand that what is happening almost every day in Kharkiv, Odessa, Luhansk, Donetsk, Sumy, Chernihiv, Kherson is a question of targeting evil points.
According to Mezentsev, and common sense just as well, investments in Ukrainian defense companies are beneficial for European partners, for obvious reasons, as the production of weapons in Ukraine is cheaper multifold than in Europe. That is probably why Sweden will invest in the production of long-range drones, and Denmark will invest additional 40 million in high-tech developments. Such investments allow also Ukrainian manufacturers to feel safely. Access to funds, that's right, and that is swift developing, testing and scaling up weapons production, as the respective states and Ukrainian manufacturers cannot fully finance them. Mezentsev also notes that important role of the European Commissioner for Defence and Space, Andrius Kubilius, who is actively working to find formulas to ensure Ukrainian defence and support domestic production of long-range weapons in Ukraine. On the night of May 7th, Russian troops attacked Kiev with missiles and strike drones. 2 people were killed. First, Russia has sent ballistic missiles. Their parts and debris fell in one of the districts of the capital, which caused a fire. Another district was targeted, a residential area. Again, this time, fires broke out in several apartments on the upper floors of residential buildings. As a result, the upper floors of a residential building was completely destroyed. Also, the debris of a downed Russian drone has hit a residential building, another one in a district of Kiev. This is where 2 people were killed.
I heard the sound of Shahed drone, then the explosion. To be honest, I thought it was somewhere near the American embassy, a bit further away, but from that direction. And then my neighbor called and said that the first entrance in our building was on fire. This was at 5 in the morning.
At first there was the noise, the typical noise. Even, it was clear it was flying at the same height and with the same speed without lowering. Then there was a sudden explosion, and then we found ourselves in the corridor. Then we went out to look what happened, because we saw reflections of fire on the trees. We understood our house was hit.
So what we have here, during one night, 2 dead and 8 wounded. Well, for those of you viewers living in America and England, imagine that happening in your hometown, capitals like New York or London. How outrageous and unacceptable that will be to you, and how fast you think this war with Russia will be over then. Well, whatever the answer is for you, for us in Ukraine, it's just another Wednesday, and the war is raging on. At the moment, Putin is the only obstacle to a ceasefire in Ukraine. Putin is the only obstacle to ceasefire in Ukraine, says Keith Kellogg. Well, that makes it him and 40+ million Ukrainians to agree. Ukraine has already agreed a comprehensive ceasefire with Russia proposed by the United States. However, the main obstacle to halting hostilities of the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin is, yes, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. The US Special Representative for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, stated that on Fox News. He also noted that Ukraine agreed to a ceasefire under numerous conditions, some of which Kyiv does not like. In contrast, Russia has effectively rejected all US initiatives.
The Ukrainians agreed that a comprehensive ceasefire is necessary, on land, at sea, and in the air, for 30 days, with the possibility of extension. They want this today. We returned from London 2 weeks ago. We spoke with the coalition of the willing, led by the British, French, and Germans. And they are ready for this comprehensive ceasefire, with many conditions, and the Ukrainians agree to it. Keith Kellogg, U.S. Special Envoy, in a comment for Fox News.
The Special Envoy acknowledged that not all the conditions are favorable for Ukraine. Exactly, but we are moving in the direction that needs to be taken, Kellogg added that the parties are close to a possible ceasefire. I think we're close. The only person who can make this happen is President Trump, but only if Putin agrees. And I believe right now our obstacles to progress is the President of Russia, who is refusing them. I don't know even what to say here, other than welcome to the club, Mr. Kellogg. Let us talk a little bit about efforts of American nation to establish peace in Ukraine. Since returning to the White House, Donald Trump, as a representative of American nations, repeatedly called for an end to the war in Ukraine and for peace talks between Kiev and Moscow. We all know that. He has expressed concerns over the prolonged fighting and high human toll, emphasizing the need to stop the bombings and the weekly death of thousands of young people. Trump also noted that both sides, Russia and Ukraine, are interested in actually ending this conflict. However, during negotiations with the Trump administration, Russia simply puts forward absolutely unacceptable demands, including the cutting off Ukrainians' military ties with NATO, for example, or the adoption of a neutral status, whatever that means, with a limited army so Russia can murder us Ukrainians anytime faster and easier than they are doing it now. What doesn't end up so well with Trump as Putin expected after he presented the oil on canvas to Trump. And recently, Donald Trump even threatened sanctions against Russia if it fails to engage in genuine peace negotiations, and the whole world is actually looking forward to it. President Trump. Friedrich Merz was finally appointed German Chancellor. Indeed, at the second attempt. Just hours after an unprecedented defeat, and that defeat signaled deep discontent within his coalition. In a hastily organized session on Tuesday afternoon, 325 lawmakers in Germany voted to approve his appointment, more than 316 he required. Merz, who won an election in February and unveiled a ruling coalition last month, had fallen 6 votes short earlier in the day. A stunning setback, actually, that marked another twist in a tortuous period of uncertainty for the country. He was finally approved as Chancellor by Germany's president and sworn in at the Bundestag on Tuesday afternoon. But his tenure will start an unstable footing. The day's votes not only revealed reluctance inside his own coalition, but gave the insurgent far-right AfD party a new opportunity to ruffle the political establishment. That unprecedented defeat. This time followed by the win, but it just may not happen next time, as this is exactly how all the far-right populist parties ever come to power, using discontent and vulnerability of the moderate leftist politicians that take a hard burden to really improve things. It's tough and risky, and people often, well, let's put it straightforward, always are unwilling to wait for results for years to come. People do not have a spare life to live, they want a change to take place now. And people also want it to be not only swift, but painless. And who on the face of this earth could offer them painless, swift relief of big, painful social issues? That's right, far right. Populists, they do not even have to offer anything else to their constituency but the mistakes and disadvantages of the left. So Merz won. Good, thank God. But what about the people of Germany? Do they understand how important to arm and aid Ukraine is for Germany?
I mean the Bundestag. There is also the lower chamber of the Bundesrat. They directly form the government, form a coalition position. They influence the course of events. And, of course, we see that the support from the people, the population, the voters, it does not decrease. It actually increases. It was reflected in the elections. And, thank God, we were lucky that the radical parties did not receive such high support, which they calculated with their populism by calling for example, the suspension of the support of Ukraine.
Not much to add here, but to say mit freundlichen Grüßen, Herr Chancellor Merz. Minerals deal. Is it good? Is it bad? What is next? Why? Who's responsible? For what exactly? Relax. We got you covered. UATV English is here for you. Sit back and learn in our report.
A mineral resources agreement between Ukraine and the United States could serve as a lever of pressure on Russia, according to U.S. Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent. He stated that the Russian leadership became uneasy following the deal due to the benefits it offers both countries. Additionally, the resource agreement may help repair ties between Kyiv and Washington, which have recently experienced some difficulties, Bessent said.
So the idea was start with Ukraine, sign a deal that shows that there is no daylight between the U.S. and the Ukrainian people. It would be a symbol to Ukrainian people that the U.S. is still there. It would be a symbol to a tired American public, skeptical of more financial commitments, that it was possible to have a shared prosperity with Ukraine. And then it would, in essence, be a tacit security guarantee because of the economic partnership.
On April 30th, Ukraine's Ministry of Economy Yulia Sviridenko and the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent signed an agreement for joint mineral extraction. A deal allows American companies to mine a list of 57 critical minerals. 50% of their royalties will be allocated to a special fund by the Ukrainian government. The U.S. in turn has pledged to match Ukraine's contributions to the fund with payments made through the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation. The agreement does not specify how the extracted mineral revenues will be used. Experts suggest the funds will likely go toward purchasing American weapons and infrastructure development in Ukraine.
We developed a version of the agreement that provides mutually beneficial terms for both countries. This agreement demonstrates the United States' commitment to long-term peace in Ukraine and acknowledges Ukraine's contribution to global security by giving up its nuclear arsenal. It also affirms the U.S. commitment to Ukraine's security, recovery, and reconstruction. Yulia Sviridenko, Minister of Economy of Ukraine, on Facebook.
Experts note that the April 30th agreement is only one piece of what Kyiv and Washington must finalize before full-scale mineral extraction can begin. Unresolved issues include whether the Ukrainian and American contributions to the fund are truly equal and the stipulation that at first all funds will be invested solely within Ukraine. Moreover, the agreement still needs to be ratified by Ukraine's parliament, the Verkhovna Rada.
The government is counting on your support for the swift ratification of this agreement and for continued cooperation toward its successful implementation. This agreement will undoubtedly become the foundation of a new relationship with the United States, one that is crucial for defending our sovereignty during the war and for rebuilding our country after it.
Although the agreement does not include explicit security guarantees, both Kyiv and Washington argue that it effectively serves that purpose. Experts say that as the U.S. winds down its military presence in Europe, Washington is seeking to strengthen economic cooperation, thus ensuring it remains engaged in regional security one way or another.
For now, it seems they're testing a model of how to maintain a presence. I think this investment agreement represents the idea that even if the US appears to be stepping back, in reality, it's not leaving entirely and can always return.
Analysts also believe the mineral agreement could help legitimize the transfer or sale of American weapons to Ukraine. A note from a US Department of State official has appeared in US congressional records indicating that Washington is preparing to sell arms to Kyiv worth at least $50 million. Earlier reports suggested the White House was working on a small defense aid package for Ukraine. Reported by Alexander Zaslavets, Andriy Dmitrenko, UATV News.
Well, that seems to be it for tonight. My name is Enrique and we are UATV English. Thank you so very much for watching. We really appreciate your presence. It was News Pulse. See you on the next beat.